You wake before the sun, not because an alarm nudges you but because the river tells you. In the cool dark, the Nile breathes a steady, ancient rhythm, a low, constant lap against the bank that has measured time for generations. Your feet touch packed earth, and the stones still hold the warmth of yesterday's heat. A faint breeze moves across reed mats and oil lamps, carrying the scent of damp clay, crushed grain, and distant papyrus. For a moment you simply stand, listening to the slow conversation between water and land, and it feels as if the world has paused to give you back a single, unhurried breath. If you're already picturing the river, the smell of earth, and the warmth of the early sun, you're in the right place. Let's stay here together a while. And if you enjoy these quiet journeys through history, you can follow along for more. This is not a place of marble halls and golden thrones. Not for most people who live here. The great monuments you've seen in pictures belong to another order of life, set by temples and tombs and the hands of kings. Your life is modest. A mud brick house with a low doorway, a reed mat for sleeping, a small hearth, and a courtyard where children chase one another with clay cups. You know the rhythm of simple tasks, the grindstone's slow circle, the hollow clack of woven reeds, the hollow thud when a sack of grain is dropped. Here, survival is not guaranteed by lineage but by daily practice and the small economies of neighborly help. Listen to how constant the Nile feels. It is older than memory, older than the rulers that sometimes rise or fade, older than the stories carved into stone. For you, it is life and worry tangled together. When the river floods kindly, the fields return fertility and the granaries are full. When it is stingy, mouths are hungry and tempers fray. Survival here is a steady negotiation with weather, water, and the small acts of daily care. Mending sandals, carrying water in clay jars, sheltering children from the noon glare. You learn to read slight changes, the color of the clouds, the feel of a wind, the way the papyrus trembles, because those small signs decide whether your pots will be full in the months ahead. The work begins quietly. Women like you rise to pull coarse linen around their shoulders, to check the small lamp, to tuck loose hair away so it won't snag on the grindstone. You move by habit and muscle. The motions are both practical and taught by those who came before you. Your hands remember how to press grain, how to bake the dense flat loaves that will feed a family through many mornings. You know which herbs help a child's fever and where, behind the courtyard wall, the papyrus reeds rustle when the wind changes. The day is shaped by tasks, the careful tending of a child, the barter at the well, the patient weaving of a basket that will carry dates to market. And yet, amid the chores, there is tenderness. Children still curl against you in the breathless quiet before dawn. A neighbor brings news of a birth. A bowl of thin beer is shared between workers who will head to the fields together. These small kindnesses are the threads that hold daily life together, tiny bright stitches that make hardship palatable. You do not live alone in your worry. The village is a network of mutual care and small economies, where favors are currency and gossip is a kind of news. Someone watches your goat when you must fetch water. Someone else will help lift a heavy basket into a high window. It is how communities endure. You should know that life here is led. Social rank matters, not just the difference between palace and field, but between those who hold scribal knowledge and those who do not, between craftsmen who hammer copper and the women who weave their baskets. Yet most days, those distinctions blur in the courtyard and at the well. Survival makes common cause of many differences. People trade skills and help, and through those exchanges you learn the rhythms of a profession that is not written on papyrus but taught by touch, sound, and repetition. The past is never purely scenic. The sky here can be tender and vast, full of stars that seem close enough to touch. It can also be an endless, burning dome that cracks the earth. The long, slow history of Egypt, thousands of seasons shaped by river and sun, presses on the small decisions you make. Where to plant your seeds, when to fix the roof, whether to lend grain to a neighbor. You are not merely a figure in a distant tableau. You are a person whose days are full of skill, fear, comfort, and hope. So let the image settle. Feel the cool clay beneath your bare feet. Hear the river's patient voice. Keep this calm in your mind as we walk further into the day, into work and ritual, into the tiny moments that made this world turn. There are harder truths ahead: sickness, sharp hunger, the sting of loss. But beginning with the river's hush lets us meet those truths with gentleness and understanding. For now, breathe with the Nile, and know that you are entering a life that is ordinary and remarkable all at once. Later, we'll walk through the day together, feel the harvest dust on your palms, the quiet prayer at a household shrine, the market's warm chaos, and by the time night comes you'll understand why the Nile was both cradle and gatekeeper of this life. For now, rest into the river's patience and breathe slowly with me. You wake because the village wakes. First there is a soft, high crow from a distant rooster, then the slow splash of an oar upriver, the whisper of someone stepping across packed earth toward the well. The air is cool and thin before the sun finds the horizon. It carries the smell of damp clay from yesterday's mending and the faint sweetness of soaking grain. When you swing your legs from the reed mat, the fibers leave a small pattern on your calves. Bare feet meet cool floor. For a moment you close your eyes and hold the small, exact calm of that instant, the hush before motion. Washing is simple and careful. If the river is friendly that morning you will carry a clay jar to its bank, crouch at the water's edge, and let your hands cup the Nile's surface. The water looks dark and deep, reflecting the first pale sweep of sky. You pour, you rinse, you splash. The sensation of coolness across your cheeks is immediate and honest. On days when the river has gone far or the task is too burdensome, you pour from a stored jar, and the water smells faintly of clay and last night's soot. There is no luxury of hot baths, but the ritual is precise, and it cleans both body and thought enough for the work ahead. Morning food is quiet, practical, and enough. Bread is dense and warm, torn into pieces with fingers calloused by years of kneading. The smell of baked grain, earthy, slightly sweet, fills the small house. Beer, thin and nourishing, is shared in shallow cups, not the festive brew of temple days but a daily, sustaining drink that keeps hunger from clawing at the belly. You chew slowly, mindful of saving the best crust for younger hands. Your breakfast is not hurried. It fits into your hands the way a habit fits into a palm, used to the shape and comforting in its predictability. The chores move in an unhurried order. The grindstone must be turned for flour. A child's hair must be braided and tied. A small threshold swept free of sand. You check the storage jars, one for beans, one for barley, and measure with practiced eyes how long these reserves might last. If you care for animals, the goats or a fowl are called and fed. Reed baskets are inspected for breakage. Where a handle is frayed, you bind it in a new reed. These are not tasks performed without attention. Each stitch and scrape is part of a ledger that keeps your household whole. Women's labor is central to the household's rhythm. You are cook, nurse, midwife, and often the village's quiet organizer. You learn neighbors' needs by the way they knock, a single soft tap for urgent help, 3 slow knocks for company, and you repay with time and small goods. When fields are in season you rise earlier. When the flood has come and the ground is sodden, there is more work in the mills and less in carrying water. The agricultural calendar shapes everything. Planting is hopeful and delicate, harvest is urgent and communal, and lean months are quiet with careful counting. Hygiene is pragmatic. There are no modern soaps, but small rituals protect the household. Teeth are scraped with a twig, hands are washed before bread is formed, wounds are cleaned with salt and herbal poultices. Small medicines, poppy for pain, willow for fevers, are known and passed down. The combination of observation and belief creates a practical pharmacy born of necessity. Not every illness yields to these remedies, but many common complaints ease with rest, warmth, and the familiar ministrations of someone who has seen similar fevers before. The sounds of the morning are layered. Voices rise in hushed conversation, children shout in a brave attempt at play, a donkey brays, and somewhere a pot bangs its lid as breakfast is readied. The market's opening is a distant stir at first, but you sense its approach. The clatter of wooden cart wheels, the faint metallic ring from a smith, the low chorus of bartering voices that rise like birdsong across water. You dress in linen that breathes in the heat to come. You wrap your head to keep dust from tangling in hair. You tuck small, useful tools into a sash at your waist. These mornings teach endurance and attention. There is no alarm that plays a neat tune. The river and the village set the timetable. You learn to trust your senses, how your joints announce the approach of cold, how the air smells before rain, how the river's surface changes with a desert wind. They are lessons that keep your family fed and sheltered. And yet there is a softness to these rituals. Even in work there are small pleasures. The warm corner of bread, the laugh of a child as they chase a shadow, the tiny relief when a basket is mended and will hold fruit again. As the sun lifts, shadows shorten and the day unfurls into purpose. Pots are slung across the shoulder, baskets balanced on hips, and you step toward the well or the field with the steady gait of someone used to wait. The village wakes fully, and the bustle that seemed distant grows close enough to touch. Before we move deeper into the labor and trade of the day, pause with me for a question. Could you wake before sunrise every day, without an alarm, simply because the river's light told you it was time? Tell me honestly, would the rhythm bring you calm, or would your body ache for the steady predictability of modern comforts? Share your thought if you like now. Either answer is true, and both feelings are understandable, truly. You move from the courtyard into the wider day with the steady assurance of muscles that know repeated tasks. If you are a farmer's wife, your first duty is to feed those who will shape the field's fate. Husbands, brothers, sons, hired hands. You lay out flat loaves and slices of dried fish on a tray, set shallow bowls of beer that will slake long thirst, and tuck small sacks of dates into a woven basket. The food is practical and meant for energy, not for ceremony. You watch as men shoulder their tools, wooden handles rubbed smooth by use, flint blades catching early light, and you steady a cloth around a child who will come with you to the field. There is a ritual to these mornings. The slow tilting of a cup offered to an elder, the quick knot of a sandal strap, the ways in which everyone's tasks fit into one another like joined reeds. The field is a place of light and dust. You feel the soil underfoot, cool in morning and warm by noon. Planting is careful work. Seeds are placed with measured fingers into rows learned by the eye. Harvest is intense and communal. Neighbors arrive with baskets and rhythm, and you move together in a cadence that is almost song. You bend to cut, to bundle, to toss sheaves so they may dry in the sun. Your hands blister sometimes. Your palms develop grooves that read like maps of years. The physicality is raw, honest, and relentless. Aches that will fade with sleep and return with sunrise. But there is a distinct satisfaction in seeing a row come true, in knowing that the bread on your table followed fingers like yours. If your household is artisanal instead, your day breathes differently but with equal purpose. The workshop's door is low and cool. Inside, light filters through a small opening and falls across wood shavings that smell faintly of sap and sawdust. A copper worker hammers at an anvil. Each ring is bright and precise, a sound that measures the rhythm of production. You sit at a low bench, reed strips between your fingers, weaving a basket where each under and over secures the next. The texture under your hands is firm and forgiving at once. A potter turns a wheel and the clay's wet skin cools your palms. A smith's breath clouds in toolshed steam and the scent of heated metal anchors the space. Apprentices wait with careful eyes, learning the minute pressures that transform a lump into a useful object. Markets belong to both these lives and to many others. You go in the mid-morning with goods to swap or sell. The market is a river of its own. Not water but sound and color. Stalls are shaded with rough cloth. Pots of oil glint in the sunlight. Strings of onions hang like garlands. The air is a layered perfume, cumin and coriander, fish and fresh bread, the faint bitter smoke from a brazier. Traders call their wares in cheerful, circular phrases. You might think the market seems exotic, yet would you notice how quickly feet ache or baskets weigh? Bargaining and exchange are practiced motions, and each trade is also a small social performance. You learn to read tone as well as price, to know when to stand firm and when to smile. The market sounds are punctuated by gossip and small news. A woman speaks of a cousin who found work near the temple. A man grumbles about taxes. A boy laughs about a goat that, had it its way, would have eaten a seam of cloth. These are the newspapers of the village, the stories that decide who will come to your aid and who will need someone's charity. The market is also where skills intersect. A scribe may be found writing a letter for someone who cannot read, while a smith trades a knife for a length of cloth from a weaver. Scribes hold a special place. Knowledge folded into ink and reed marks gives them economic value beyond muscle. Yet at noon the courtyard and the stall share bread. Distinctions soften when hunger comes. Work is not only toil. It is also a place where relationships are braided. Shared labor invites songs and stories. The song may not be written on a stone, but it carries memory, about last year's rain, about a funeral 2 villages over, about a wedding where someone danced badly and everyone remembered. When hands are busy, mouths are freer to speak. You learn news while you weave, and you tell old jokes while you thresh. This is how culture is transmitted among people whose lives are too full for long formal schooling, through rhythm, repetition, and the murmured corrections of those who have done the task longer. Physical fatigue arrives and is accepted as part of the day's accounting. By noon your shoulders are marked by sun. Your feet may ache from standing on hot ground, and when you sit to eat you feel that honest emptiness that comes from spending energy for collective good. The midday pause, shade under a fig or a sycamore, bread and water for a quick repast, feels earned. It is then that the village breathes as one for a moment. Children nap in the shade, and elders tell short tales that are less about entertainment and more about direction, like weathered maps guiding small decisions. You rest, you cool, you fold your energy inward for the afternoon's work. Yet labor brings risks. A slip with a tool can bruise a limb. A child left too near a river may be pulled by a sudden current. A poorly stored grain sack may attract rodents that ruin months of work. Illness can take a strong worker and leave a family unsteady. You plan with these possibilities in mind. A neighbor's favor is banked as if it were grain. A shared meal can be a lifeline. This prudence shapes social relationships into webs of mutual obligation. It is not only the land or tools that sustain you but knowledge, of when to sow, when to pray, which herbs soothe an aching throat, passed down in small, exact ways. You remember too that certain days demand special labor. The levy of grain for temple dues, the hurried repairs before festival processions, the teaching of an apprentice who will one day take your stool. These obligations fold into daily work like seams in a garment, sometimes tight, sometimes comforting, but always present. There are also small economies of exchange, a favor repaid with a loaf, a borrowed tool returned with extra flourish. These are the invisible transactions that grease the village's wheel. As evening approaches, the market empties and the workshops close. You return home with a basket balanced on your hip, a small sense of satisfaction or a quiet worry depending on the day's yield. In your hands you carry more than goods. You carry the day's exchanges, the news, the laughter, and the small agreements that will become tomorrow's support. The work of the day is both a burden and a promise. It proves your capacity to meet another morning and it binds you to others who will meet it with you. The sun climbs higher and the air becomes a thick, slow thing that wraps around your shoulders like a damp cloth. By mid-morning the sharp brightness has softened into a heavy glare that presses the world flat, and even the constant chorus of work takes on a slower tempo. People move less quickly, voices drop as if to avoid breaking the glass-like quiet. You step beneath the fig tree because shade is not luxury here but a small, vital seat of mercy. The leaves whisper in a breeze that feels like a hand across your forehead. The shadow under the branches is cool and a little dusty, and you sit where the earth is firm. There is a particular pleasure in the pause. A plate of dates and a slice of warm bread are passed among those who gather, each piece unwrapped slowly and, if you are careful, shared so there is enough for everyone. The sweet flesh of dates is dense and silk-soft. Bread crumbs cling to fingertips and find tiny grooves in your palm. Children, briefly released from chores, play by shaping wet clay into crude cups or racing small painted sticks down the packed road. Their laughter is a high, bright thread in the heavy air, and it lifts the afternoon like a hand-smoothing cloth. Women sit in small circles, leaning into conversation the way they lean into work. A hand turns the grindstone in a slow, reliable circle. Another fingers the warp threads of a loom, eyes narrowed in the steady concentration that makes patterns true. Stories spread in whispers and short bursts, an engagement announced, a calf sick with fever, a neighbor who found an extra measure of barley in a miscounted store. This is how knowledge passes, not in long lessons but in the rhythm of shared tasks and the quiet corrections of those who have done the job longer. Advice and gossip are braided together, practical and human. Music arrives in small, human doses. Someone hums while shelling beans. A child taps a stone like a tiny drum. A neighbor at the shade edge plucks a reed flute with soft, wandering notes. These fragments of sound do what the shade cannot. They stitch the afternoon's scattered moments into a single piece. A lullaby soothes a fretting child. An old work song returns in a few lines when hands need to remember step and breath. There is no formal performance here, only the gentle sound of life making itself known. Even in these slow hours, belief moves quietly through action. Amulets hung from simple cords swing against chests. A woman fingers a small figure of a protective god when a dust-laden wind moves across the street. Tiny offerings appear at household shrines, crumbs, a coil of perfumed resin, a loop of string, placed there with the sort of reverence that is equal parts hope and habit. People speak short prayers for the hands about to return to labor and for children who nap under blankets in alley shade. These rituals are soft scaffolding. They steady a day that might otherwise fray. Superstition and ordinary caution are braided together. Someone mutters a word when a cat crosses the path. Another tosses a pinch of grain to the side before opening a jar, a way to honor unseen spirits and keep harm at bay. When a pregnant woman sits in the circle, she is given a string dipped in saffron to bind a charm around her wrist, an act of tender fear and hope meant to hold danger out by the strength of company and custom. These practices are not only about gods and ghosts. They are practical pauses, ways to turn anxiety into an action. There is comfort in routine. The rhythms of the agricultural calendar are everywhere in conversation. Who will plant next? Which month the flood will come? Which fields were spared last year's blight? You can sense a collective memory in the way hands move and voices soften when a certain story is told, as if each household carries the imprint of seasons in its bones. This memory is practical as much as spiritual. It tells you where to keep seeds safe, when to mend a roof, and how to coax a stubborn child to sleep. The midday respite also creates space for tenderness. A neighbor smooths a child's hair. A mother hands a small piece of date to an elder who has trouble chewing. Two women exchange a knowing look and a nod that says more than any direct sentence could. These small gestures are tiny anchors, proof that life includes softness even when it is shaped by need. They are the private acknowledgments that hard labor will continue, but that the work is worth something because people count for one another. Heat leaves its marks, a sheen on the skin, a callus on a thumb, the way water is craved more hungrily. You drink from a shared jar, cupping the clay with both hands, and feel gratitude that these moments of cool exist. Shade and company transform the heat from an enemy into an experience you share. The pause becomes a small ceremony of rest, a collective agreement to be still for a while before the day's weight returns. As the sun moves, the light changes subtly and the promise of movement returns. Shadows lengthen and the air cools by degrees. The lull ends not with an abrupt sound but with a soft, shared inhale as people fold their small comforts and prepare to return to tools. You stand, dust the hem of your linen, braid a child's hair again, and sling a basket back over your hip. In these last moments of stillness, you feel the day's heart steady itself for the work ahead. Would you enjoy these pauses, these slow hours under the sun? Or would you long for the rush and noise of our own age? Stay with that feeling a while longer. These pauses teach you to notice small mercies. The way breath softens, the way hands remember what to do, the way a shared date tastes sweeter after labor. We will carry this gentle rhythm onward into afternoon work and the quieter rituals that follow. You move through the day carrying small unseen threads. Religion here is not a distant ceremony held by men in high rooms. It is braided into how you tie a bundle, how you set a pot on the hearth, how you hush a child to sleep. In the corner of your house sits a small altar, just a shallow niche in the mud brick with a bit of pigment still clinging to its edges. You kneel there sometimes, bare knees pressing the warm earth, and arrange a few crumbs of bread, a curl of incense resin, a tiny coil of perfumed oil. The offering is small and exact. It is both habit and petition. You do this for practical reasons. To ask that work goes well today, that children sleep, that a cough does not deepen into fever. Household gods are modest, practical things. A little figurine of Biz, funny-faced and fierce, hangs on a cord near a cradle. Its mouth is a grin that is mostly meant to be scary. A small statue of Tauret, half hippo, half protective mother, sits near the bed where births are planned. Its round belly comforts like a hand. You know which charm to press into a sweating palm when labor stalls, which small image to set beside a child who coughs at night. These are not talismans worn only for show. They are tools of care. You and your neighbors treat them with the same practicality you give a mortar and pestle. Both are useful in seasons that demand tending. Sickness often sits between herbal hands and worded protection. Jars of dried herbs line a shelf. Mallow leaves for a sore throat, willow bark chewed in a pinch for pain, a poultice of crushed garlic and bread pressed over a cut to keep it clean. Yet alongside these familiar remedies there are words that work in their own way. A quick incantation is breathed over a fevered child. A spit is symbolically cast to distract a malevolent spirit, and the names of protective figures are whispered like stitches. Medicine and magic live in the same basket. Each practice gives the household another chance to hold illness at bay. Sometimes the herb cools a burning brow and the prayer soothes the anxious mother. Sometimes neither works, and then grief becomes another kind of teaching. The temple sits a little way from home, taller than other buildings. Its stone face is painted and rubbed by hands that have been many generations deep. It is a different atmosphere, heavy with incense, lined with men and women who move in rituals that the village does not perform every day. Priests keep the larger order of things. They tend the inner fires, they read the language of offerings, they organize festivals when the year requires it. You go to the temple sometimes, when you have a question you cannot answer, when a marriage needs an oath, when the harvest calls for communal thanks. Inside the temple courts there are longer prayers, measured offerings, and the sense of being part of a city-sized conversation with the gods. Festivals are when your ordinary life is folded into something louder and brighter. A feast day will send a ripple through the village. Fires stoked for whole roasted birds, cloth banners tied to poles, a procession moving like a slow river toward the temple. People wear their nicest linen, even if it is patched. Children run with ribbons. Musicians play reed pipes and small drums until the bones of the day vibrate. For a while the daily ledger of tasks loosens. You carry trays of cakes to share, and you watch masked figures move in a ritual you have seen since you were small. For those hours, differences soften. The trader and the potter eat from the same platter, and you feel part of a larger story that lasts beyond your life. Women's roles in these rituals are deep and varied. You are the household priest in many ways. The one who lights the lamp at dawn. The one who ties a protective bead to a child's wrist before they run out to play. The one who knows which smile and which word will calm a neighbor. Midwives hold a special place, both revered and practical. When a woman labors, the midwife's hands guide breaths and hips. Her voice calls on protective names, and her techniques are a blend of careful anatomy and learned ritual. The midwife's work is threaded with superstition and knowledge. When to apply pressure, which herb to soothe a cramp, which charm to tie at the child's wrist when it first breathes. Marriage customs are both contract and companionship. A marriage binds households as much as hearts. Agreements about grain, work, and who watches which animals are part of the spoken vows. There are small rituals, an exchange of cloth, a blessing at a household shrine, that mark the joining. Marriage is also a public thing. It anchors networks and ensures that the labor of raising a family will be shared. In this way, religion and social order braid together. Legal obligations and spiritual promises fold into daily life, making both stronger and, sometimes, more fraught. Childbirth is practiced with a balance of fear and hope. You sit with a laboring woman, steadying her hip, murmuring the same words the midwife has taught you, feeling the tense rhythm of breath and push. Herbs are on hand to ease pain after the danger has passed. Songs ease the mind during the long hours. Naming a child is a small public act. Wrapped in a narrow strip of linen, the baby is presented to the household gods and to neighbors who will be witnesses and helpers. The name is a promise and a protection. Announcing it is like making a new seam in a fabric that holds a family together. Death is handled with equivalent tenderness, though with a colder edge. Bodies are washed and wrapped with care. A final meal may be placed beside the wrapped figure. Mourners move in a slow, precise choreography. You have seen families fold grief into ritual, sobbing and singing by turns, placing beads and flint, saying words you have heard since childhood. Burial practices are an act of caregiving continued. The dead are entrusted to the earth with small goods that might comfort them in a next place. In these moments, belief gives an ordered structure to loss, and that order can be a shelter as much as anything. Belief gives shape to fear and meaning to habit. When you lift a jar to the market, you first touch the charm at your belt. When you cross a dusty fork in the road, you might mutter a short thanks. These gestures are not empty. They are ways to steady the day. They teach you where to go when the world tilts, what to offer when the field is thin, and how to ask for mercy when sickness comes. At times the gods' favor seems far and fickle. An omen, an overturned pot, a snake in a doorway, can set a household into a flurry of offerings and fasts. Yet even in worry, ritual creates an action, and action lends a kind of agency to those who would otherwise feel helpless. If every action you took carried the weight of pleasing the gods, how differently would you live? Ask yourself this as you fold the small practices into the rest of your imagined day. There is comfort here, an ordered ritual that makes the uncertain tolerable, and there is constraint, the pressure of expectations and the vigilance that never fully rests. Both are true. The invisible threads of belief run through the day like veins, holding blood and memory together. As we move forward, carry this sense with you. These rituals continue to shape small choices and quiet daily courage. You return home as the sun leans low and the Nile slides into a warm burnished color. Dust settles in the hollows of your sandals and a cool breath lifts from the river. On the lane you catch the evening sounds. A woman calling a child, fowl clucking, the soft tinkle of a goat bell. Your limbs hold the honest ache of a day spent, and with that ache comes a little lightness, as if work has been paid back with bread. At the doorway you set down your tools and the woven basket you carried. A child runs out, cheeks dusty, and throws their arms around your waist. The courtyard smells of sun-warmed clay and neighbor smoke. You lift the lid from a shallow pot and breathe the first note of the evening meal. Lentils simmered with a scrap of fish, a handful of greens, bread warmed on hot stones. The smell is earthy, the steam like a promise that steadies you. Preparing supper is a quiet choreography. Someone stokes coals with a flat wooden paddle while another grinds spice in a mortar. A clay jug holds water cooled in the shade. Another jar bears oil for lamps. The lamp is a shallow bowl of oil with a twisted linen wick. Its flame is modest and steady, creating small pools of light that draw faces inward. Those little pools do not chase away the night but invite closeness. There are no clocks here. The hours are read by shadow and wind, by the cool that climbs from the water and by the slow arrival of the first star. Without screens or city noise, attention rests on friends and family. You notice the tired line at a neighbor's mouth, the way a child rubs an eye, the exact moment when a goat settles down. The evening is paced by senses and relationships, not by appointments. Storytelling fills that space between work and sleep. An elder begins a tale of a clever child who outwits a jackal, and the story unfurls, changing slightly each time it is told. Work songs surface as soft hums. A rhythm that once set scythes now steadies hands peeling beans. Practical tales, how to mend a roof after wind, which herb eases a fever, are repeated until they live in muscle and voice rather than on a page. Hands teach as much as words. A woman shows a child how to knot a basket rim. An apprentice studies the exact angle of a smith's hammer. You learn to read a neighbor's palm like a map, to know what tool made a particular scar, which scent belongs to a trader just returned. Objects keep memory. A chipped pot tells of a fall. A spindle's groove remembers a whole year of spinning. As evening deepens, the market's day is unpacked at many doors. Traders bring small packets of news, who paid extra to a collector, which field looks promising next season, which family needs a hand. These items are folded into plans at supper. Who will lend a sack, who can mind goats next week, whose roof needs mending. Decisions are made by hearthlight as often as at public meetings. The household is a place of feeling and action. There are still chores, fodder to throw to animals, jars checked for pests, the yard swept to discourage snakes. Yet these tasks sit beside rest. One hand smooths a sleeping child while another tightens a basket rim. Meals are eaten slowly, with gratitude for the day's bread. A shared cup of thin beer tastes of sun and grain and feels like rest itself. Small rites continue into dusk. A grain kernel is set at the household shrine. A tiny charm is laid by a child's pillow. Quiet prayers are breathed like cloth folded into a drawer, acts of comfort as much as petitions. A mother ties a charm at a wrist and hums a short invocation. It is as much a practical pause as a plea. Outside the courtyard, the Nile sings its evening song. Boats slide with gentler strokes and water whispers against the bank. A fish sometimes splashes, punctuation in the long sentence of night. The stars seem startlingly close. Elders point them out and read weather from their patterns, just as one would read clouds. You climb onto a reed mat and tuck a child close, smoothing linen across small shoulders. A lullaby slips from memory, a few repeated lines learned from your mother and from hers. The mat is simple, a woven reed roll on a pallet, a thin blanket if the night promises chill. Without the constant noise of modern life, your sleep is edged by small sounds. The steady breath beside you, a distant dog, the river's patient rhythm. There is a rooted calm in that knowing. Here, you have done what the day required. The lamplight reveals a household's small architecture of care. Repaired nets folded in a corner, reeds waiting to be woven, jars arranged by use rather than by label. Tools rest where hands last left them. A pestle leaning against a mortar, a spindle nestled in a basket. These objects hold lessons. A repair tells who mended it. Sometimes an elder hums a festival refrain. Night also asks for watchful kindness. On darker evenings a neighbor sits up to listen, and small groups trade news from upriver. Tales told at these watches are practical warnings, where a snake crossed a path, which child strayed too near the bank. These notes are gentle. They are another form of care, the village protecting itself with shared attention. You exhale, held by community. Do you think you would find this quiet peaceful? Or would the darkness feel too deep? Both answers are honest. The hush brings closeness and the open night can feel wide. Keep that question by your side as the lamps burn lower and the household settles. Soon we will step further into the night where dreams awake and hidden risks linger, and where rest itself becomes a careful practice. Lie down on the reed mat and feel the weave press a soft pattern into your back. The night hums around you. Insects tapping in the dark, a distant dog answering another dog's call, the steady splash where a boats or meets the Nile. The house breathes in its slow rhythm, mud brick settling, a child's even exhale beside you. Close your eyes and imagine. Would you sleep soundly here, with the river just outside your door? You tuck a thin blanket close, the linen rough but familiar, and the sounds shape themselves into careful company. Night is not empty. It is attentive. You notice small details, the scrape of a reed, the distant clink of a jar, a watchman's low call as he passes the lane. The village lowers itself into a cautious calm, each household arranging its own small protections. Dreams carry messages. An odd dream can stir a mother to touch an amulet, to whisper a name over a child's brow, to call for a neighbor who knows the right words. People read dreams as one reads weather, for warning, for meaning, for the comfort of pattern. A dream of swelling water, or of birds attacking grain, is spoken about softly until it is placed in a ritual that feels more like counsel than fear. These actions do not make the world safe in a grand sense, but they make nights feel manageable. Charms and small images live beside your sleeping mat. Biz grins from a thread around the cradle. Toret's rounded figure is set where births are planned. You press a cool bead into a child's fist, feeling the weight of it steady both your hand and their breath. These objects are not luxury. They are practical assurances. A pinch of salt under a mat, a line of ash at the threshold, a lamp left low. Each is a tiny strategy against the night's uncertainties. There are practical worries too. Snakes rest in warm crevices and sometimes slide into courtyards when the stone cools. You have seen one carried off on a pole and watched neighbors burn a cautionary line. The river hides sudden currents and deep holes. A child leaning too far over a bank can slip before a shout reaches them. Illness often tightens at night, a fever that climbs while sleep tries to keep body and mind soft. These dangers are not myth. They are part of daily accounting. Tonight you keep a reed staff and a small oil lamp near the door. If a thief comes, it is usually for bread or grain. The village itself is the best defense. Voices gather quickly, and favors are repaid with a readiness that acts like a net. Being known is protection. The shared memory of who belongs where means someone will come when a shout splits the hush. At the bedside your hands are busy with gentle ministrations. You dampen cloth to cool a fevered brow, press leaved poultices to aching limbs, hum a soft melody learned from your mother. These acts are both remedy and ritual, a way to insist that a loved one not be taken by fever or fright. You watch for breath, count it like a metronome, and find rest in the rhythm of caretaking. Stories live in the dark, shaped by the hush. A neighbor's tale of a flood that came late becomes a map of what to watch for. A remembered trick with a basket keeps children safe from a cunning goat. Songs surface, work rhythms turned into lullabies that ease limbs into a slower cadence. Oral memory is a nightly tutor. Practical lessons encoded in tales that tuck into a child's mind as softly as a blanket. The night watch is often a pair of quiet people sharing an oil lamp. They speak low about weather and barns, about an upcoming festival or whose sheep will need mending. These small conversations knit the village together. When the moon is thin, neighbors sit and listen to the long, patient river, trading small news so that the whole community sleeps with one eye gentle and another steady. Despite precautions, the heart knows a different rest here. Sleep is both surrender and skill. You learn how to settle so you can wake when you must, how to trust a neighbor without losing your sense. The reed mat gives way beneath you, the blanket warms, the charm rests in your palm like a slow promise. Outside, the Nile keeps its long watch, speaking in water that knows no hurry. The last lamp gutters low. You tie a final knot in a child's blanket, smooth hair from a brow, and fold a small offering into the nook where simple gods wait. A neighbor's footstep fades, and the distant chant from the temple softens like breath. The lamp's flame shivers once, twice, and then bows out. The room inhales, lets go, and a hush settles that is not empty but full of the village's steady breathing. You feel the warm press of a sleeping child, the small weight of a charm under your palm, the reed mat's pattern at your spine. The river's rhythm and your heartbeat begin to match. In that matching, you move towards sleep, not as escape but as practiced surrender within a world that watches and watches back. Rest now, with the Nile just outside your door, and let the night hold you for a little while. Beyond the courtyard, stars wheel in a slow arc that elders name and children trace with sleepy fingers. You imagine them as patient eyes that have watched this river longer than any house, witnesses of seasons. A neighbor's soft voice passes through a thin wall like a hand on your shoulder, a small promise that you are not alone. Such human tethering turns anxiety into manageable watchfulness. The lamp at the threshold shivers once, then twice, and in that folding of light you let go. The room inhales, the last sound is the Nile's hush, and sleep arrives as a quiet surrender. Now step back from the reed mat and the slow river breath, and let us look clearly at what we have been holding between us. Tonight, we entered the small, ordinary life of a village. Hands that know the grain's weight, voices that carry gossip and blessing, bodies that rise with light and fold at dusk. We felt the Nile's presence, tasted bread from practiced fingers, and watched how belief and habit braided into daily living. That closeness gives warmth and also, plainly, risk. Beauty and resourcefulness sit beside harder truths. Living close to elemental things means exposure to their whims. The sun that gilds the river also burns skin and cracks earth. A flood that brings fertility can, in a bad season, sweep away fields and stores. Illness arrives without modern warnings or vaccines, and a fever a doctor today might treat quickly could mean weeks of weakness or a life shortened. Small injuries we would stitch or disinfect may fester and become worse. Food insecurity and poor harvests can change a household's fortunes in a single season. Survival demanded practical skill and steady courage. The people you met in our imagined village were experts in knowledge that mattered. They read the sky's nuance. They knew when a wind would bring dust, which reed made the strongest basket, and which herb to press into a poultice for a swollen joint. Their knowledge was embodied, passed hand to hand, season to season, not learned from distant texts but earned through repetition and repair. That expertise made them resilient. It let households reroute when storms or sickness came, and it anchored communities in habits that worked. But resilience had limits, and social structures often tightened rather than eased precariousness. If you were a skilled artisan or a minor official, you might fare better than a landless laborer, but most people's stability was fragile. Taxes, labor levies for the state or temple, and the demands of landlords could swiftly hollow out stores. Women frequently carried compounded burdens, feeding and nursing, producing textiles, managing children and household medicine, while having limited legal recourse. Families were interdependent in ways our modern lives sometimes do not teach, and that interdependence could be both lifeline and liability. Ritual and religion threaded through this life with complex effects. Ceremonies and offerings made ordinary moments feel meaningful. Festivals loosened daily strains and gathered people into shared joy. But religious obligations could also add strain, expectations of contributions, the labor of preparing temple offerings, or social penalties for transgressing norms. Monuments and processions displayed grandeur that often relied on ordinary people's grain and labor. Admiring the temples is easy. Understanding the cost behind their stones asks a harder honesty. Even so, empathy and admiration remain vital. The villagers we pictured are not mere examples of suffering. They crafted useful tools, sang, told stories that taught children safety and history, and found tender pleasures in shade and shared bread. Recognizing hardship should not erase admiration for resourcefulness or the ways communities held one another. There is quiet dignity in lives organized around craft, care, and mutual obligation. These lives contained love, humor, skill, and small radiant moments that deserve more than pity. They deserve attention. For most modern listeners, the stark truth is plain. You likely would not last a day without the conveniences and safety nets you now rely on. This is not a moral failure. It is an honest reality shaped by differing environmental, medical, and social contexts. Your muscles, immune memory, and array of practical skills are tuned to another era's demands. Acknowledging this gap should deepen empathy rather than induce shame. It urges us to see past simplistic comparisons and to meet past people on their own terms. There are lessons worth borrowing. Neighborliness that made collective work possible, the passing of skill from hand to apprentice, the slower sense of time marked by seasons. These practices offer useful counterpoints to modern haste. Rituals and stories provided frameworks for meaning and communal care. Adopting small parts of that grouped wisdom, learning a neighbor's craft, slowing time with deliberate tasks, can make contemporary life kinder and more resilient without romanticizing hardship. There are also things we should leave behind. Unpredictable medical care, grinding daily labor without relief, the precarity born of rigid social hierarchies. These are not virtues. Recognizing the costs of such structures helps us value protections we sometimes take for granted and spurs thought about how to guard the vulnerable today. Holding both admiration and critique is the task of honest history. We can honor resilience and skill without erasing the cost those qualities demanded. We can celebrate ingenuity while acknowledging vulnerability. This balance invites gentler, more complex empathy, a way to honor people of the past as whole persons, not idealized symbols or mere victims. So, let me ask you simply, what do you think? Could you wake before dawn, labor in the sun, and sleep with the sound of the river knowing tomorrow will be much the same? Or would your heart long for the comforts and protections of now? There is no wrong answer. Your honest response becomes part of how we remember, learn from, and care for the long human story. If you feel moved, tell a friend about one small thing you would borrow from that life. Sharing these reflections keeps memory alive and makes the past a companion to our present. Your thought, whether a quiet longing or a frank refusal, matters. Truly. Let the river's sound fade gently into the background as you become aware of your own room again. The soft weight of a blanket, the quiet hum of a house that is modern and private to you. You have walked the Nile tonight with feet that learned to read the weather and hands that measured bread by touch. You carried baskets and breaths, worries and small joys. Now bring those steps home. Feel the space you are in, a pillow shaped to your head, a cup on the bedside table, the exact low light that makes familiar things gentler. History is often sold as dates and crowns, wars and tall stones. Those things matter, but they are only part of the story. The true pulse of the past beats in mornings and afternoons like the ones we visited. The small decisions and repeated tasks that make a life. People mended, traded, sang, birthed, loved, and worried. They taught children how to tie a basket and how to soothe a fever. They joked about stubborn goats and held wakes for neighbors who could not be saved. Those acts stitched together daily life and kept communities from fraying. Think of the simple skills you heard tonight: breading a loaf by hand, weaving a reed, naming a star that warns of rain. These skills kept people alive and connected. They are not exotic relics. They are practical knowledge now often hidden beneath convenience. Remembering them is not a call to abandon comforts but an invitation to notice small things that matter. A neighbor who can patch a roof, a recipe that steadies a family, the time taken to listen to someone's troubles. Small practices accumulate into safety. Gratitude sits both ways. Be grateful for the comforts and safety modern life affords. Clean water, quick medical care, the chance to rest without constant watch. Those protections are worth naming aloud. At the same time, carry gratitude for the resilience of those who came before, their patience with seasons, their creativity around scarcity, their habit of turning fear into ritual and care into daily practice. When you consider both, you learn humility about the long reach of human effort and a deeper respect for lives lived mostly out of view. If there is one quiet lesson from walking these banks, it is this: ordinary people shaped history through repeated, mundane action. A wall rises only after many hands move one brick at a time. A culture deepens when small songs are sung again and again. In honoring that, we honor not only famous names but the countless unrecorded lives that sustained a world. Let that thought rest like a small flame before you blow the lamp low. Before you sleep, consider taking a small practice from tonight into tomorrow. Maybe pause to thank someone for a kindness, or take 5 slow breaths when worry tightens your shoulders. Perhaps learn a practical habit, or keep the image of a neighbor sharing bread beneath a figure. Small things are not small when they accumulate. They become the quiet architecture of a kinder day. If you enjoyed walking these banks with me tonight, you can join me again in other times and other worlds. I have more evenings lined up. Quiet walks through moments where ordinary people live out extraordinary patience. Follow along, and bring a friend who likes slow stories. I will keep our tone calm and the details true, and together we will pay attention to life's textbooks sometimes forget. For now, let the Nile be a memory you carry like a small stone in your pocket, something meaningful and unassuming, shaped by water and time. Breathe in and out. Feel the room that holds you, the safety encircling you, and the quiet knowledge that people across time shared similar worries and comforts. This connection is a gentle companionship across ages. Perhaps tomorrow you will notice one small thing differently. A spare loaf shared, a neighbor's smile, the way light shifts on a roof, small changes that reshape a life. Rest now. Let your thoughts settle like silt in a slow pool. I leave you with a soft wish. May your sleep be gentle, may your dreams be calm, and may the ordinary courage of past people live softly in your waking. Until we meet at another riverbank, good night.